This is Tech Talk Detroit with Brian Spurgeon and Chuck Lobert. Tech Talk Detroit brings you the latest in tech news and Detroit happenings every week.
Welcome to episode 4 of Tech Talk Detroit. Today we're going to talk a little bit about why we started the podcast, where we saw a need that we thought having a couple of people with experience of being kind of that CIO or filling that role of CIO for small, medium businesses, why we saw a need of starting this podcast and talking about what a CIO does and the different topics that different small businesses might want to pay attention to. And then obviously it's the day after the Super Bowl, so we're going to have to talk about the Super Bowl. And we got some exciting events coming up this weekend in Detroit, so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So to start, Brian, why don't we talk a little bit about the need that we saw? Why do we think that small businesses, and for us, that SMB market is really any business that's under 250 users. Why do they need a CIO? What value does a CIO, whether it's somebody that's on staff with them or a virtual CIO if they're working with an outsourced company? Why do they need that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest benefits of having somebody filling that role, and there's different ways to fulfill that role, but I think ultimately they're going to provide you the strategy you need to help grow your business. Obviously, everybody in business, your goal is to have growth year to year, both from a revenue standpoint and also as from an employee standpoint in an infrastructure. So I think ultimately that's the person in your company that you should be leaning on to make sure that your infrastructure can grow with your demands, and then also that you're not just going and throwing money year to year on your technology, that there's an actual plan in place, that you're implementing a strategy, and then an investment today is something that will be in line with what your 4 or 5 year roadmap looks like.
And I think that's really where we saw that need was a lot of those small businesses don't take that strategic look, and they don't view things from a standpoint of what's going to be the best for the business, not just right now, but like you said, that forward looking 1 year, 3 year, 5 years down the road. And really that CIO, whether it's, again, somebody that's on staff or what we would call a virtual CIO, should be looking at things not from an IT management standpoint, but really from that high level, executive level viewpoint of the company. So looking at stuff like the budget, looking at stuff like, the 5 year outlook of the company, sitting in meetings that really may not have anything to do with them, but they're able to sit in those meetings and see if there's a better way to run the meeting, use systems, use technology to make the meeting more efficient, different things like that. So it's really that high level look that we're talking about. Yeah,
and I think too, that's somebody that, I think traditionally in the past, that's a role where everybody kind of looks at it as just keeping the current infrastructure up and running. But you're right, there's a lot more that role should be bringing to the table. They really should be investing a lot of time into making sure that you are leveraging the latest technology, and that the new buzzwords coming out, I think the cloud security, anything along those lines, that they're doing their due diligence to see if that applies to your business as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is if it applies to your business, because a lot of people, they see the new shiny toy, so to speak, that's out there, and they think, well, we need that or we need this, and so it's kind of looking at the why behind it. Is there actually a business need there? And now if there is a business need there, are there other options to fill that need? Let's look at all of those options. What fits into the budget? Looking at that from a long-term standpoint as well. So really looking at everything from that high level. I know a lot of the meetings that we've sat on throughout the years, that's really what we're doing. We're not necessarily making the decision on a particular piece of software or piece of hardware that's going in, but we're representing the IT to help make that decision. So we're sitting in those meetings with the rest of the executive team and really driving that discussion and looking at the other ways that you can kind of accomplish the same thing, looking at various pieces of software to accomplish the same task, all of that kind of stuff to really make sure that the end decision is the right decision for the business.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, a lot of times companies are looking at it in the sense of, okay, we got to replace this aging infrastructure on a set timeline, and that's just kind of the number, and they'll look at the previous purchase. 5 years ago we spent this, so let's just budget around the same. And if that's kind of how you operate, you're probably going to be running behind the curve, because there's a lot of different opportunities out there to potentially move your workloads to the cloud, right, and save that huge infrastructure cost. So, I think somebody in this role should be doing that homework for you. Does the line of business apps offer a cloud-hosted solution? What is the cost of that cloud-hosted solution? And if the price is there and you don't have to maintain that infrastructure and make that large upfront investment, you should be planning for that ahead of time. And the other thing too is a lot of those types of migrations, they're going to take a long time to make sure that they go off without an issue. So, I think that's a big part of it, is doing the homework and knowing up front before you have to make those investments, whether or not you're making the best choice. So,
and then I think too, driving that investment to full implementation as well. So, a lot of what we see as well is an investment that's made, and then they might use 20% of it or 50% of it or 60% of it, but there's so much more capability there that could be used to help the business, but nobody's looking at it again from that strategic standpoint. One of the big spots where we see that is, say, Office 365. We see a lot of times where people will implement Office 365, they spend the monthly investment on Office 365, and really all they're using, though, is the email, right? Or that and the applications that come with it. And so that CIO now should be looking at that investment, even though it's not a huge investment, but it's still an investment that the company's making, and saying, okay, well, how else can we use it? Let's look at the other 30 tools that you get with whatever package of Office 365 you're on, and is it properly set up for security, or is there other stuff that we can use to better utilize this investment that we've made?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and you're right. I think probably we see that more often than not when we start doing business with a company that already has an Office 365 set up. And that's a good example, because for a lot of small businesses, the server that they have on site is really just providing a small file share, access to maybe some printers, and authenticating users to log on and off the network. And really, depending on which plan you're going with Office 365, you can check all those same boxes and eliminate the need to have that on-premise infrastructure. So I think it's really understanding what else is there out there that we can leverage. But ultimately, you're right, it's what are we paying for now? What do we have in place? And are we getting the most out of it? And I think that's absolutely a huge benefit to this role.
Yeah, and I know one of the areas that we see is, with SharePoint, with Teams, there's lots that you can do with just those two tools within the Office 365 platform, where you can use between the two, you can better run meetings. For instance, it's something that we've implemented internally, is to run our meetings through the Microsoft tools, and it's really helped us to be able to keep track of the different tests that we walk out of, the timing of things, the agenda for the meetings. There's lots of stuff that we've been able to do just by implementing it within a system that we already had. We just needed to look at, okay, is there a better way that we can utilize it?
Yeah, and I think too, like with SharePoint, is the collaboration benefits you get from having your data in SharePoint, as opposed to just on a local file share on the server. And there's meetings where we're sitting in and we're working through spreadsheets, and there's multiple people in there at the same time, and we can see everything everybody's doing. So I think for us, it's one of those where the more time goes on, the more we're just offloading things to there and taking on. And even us, we're still learning different ways that we want to use this type of platform to collaborate. And, and it's also not for everyone, right? Depends on the type of files and stuff you do locally. Right. So it's not a universal solution, but ultimately that's where you should be looking at your CIO or somebody filling in that virtual CIO role, to figure out, should we be doing more with this?
Yeah, especially if you've got a team that isn't all located in one office. If you're trying to have meetings with people, sales teams, or just people that are around the state, around the country, whatever it is, that's where something like Teams could be a really good fit. And again, it's not necessarily that that's the fit for everybody, and that's not the point. The point is somebody in that role looking at ways to improve the business. Even looking at ways to help the experience for the business's clients. Even sitting in client meetings from time to time, or reviewing client feedback. Is there a way that we can help improve the business's services to their own clients as well? Is a piece of that as well.
So just a question for you, just from what you see going out there talking to different businesses, what do you think is kind of that typical scenario where companies should choose between either having their CIO role filled internally at the business or when they should leverage like a virtual CIO role? What do you typically see as kind of like that cutoff point where one may benefit the other better?
I think for the most part, it's really based on the size and the needs of the company. I'd say majority of companies that are below that 250 employee mark, majority probably don't have a need for a CIO level on staff. They may have a need for an IT manager or even an IT tech, to be on staff, depending on what the needs of the users are. But I'd say the majority probably don't need somebody at that CIO level actually on staff, because that can be a big expense to the company. And there's probably not enough happening with the technology on a day-to-day basis to justify that expense. Now, again, that's not every company. Some companies are very strategic with their technology, and maybe it makes sense to have somebody on staff to fill that need. But I'd say the majority, they don't. It's where it does make sense is those companies that really do use technology to the full, that really want somebody kind of like that, concierge level of service, where there may not be necessarily enough of the technology stuff to keep them busy all the time, but they want somebody that's constantly watching over that strategic piece. That's probably the only point where I'd say, for that under 250 user space. And really, even then, it can be filled by a virtual CIO, but that's where I guess I start to see certain companies making that decision to have that extra expense there. So that's, from my perspective, that's, from my experience, what I see. But, it's again, just kind of recap, it's really having somebody to look at that strategic plan, looking at the long-term plan. So, I assume you watched the Super Bowl yesterday.
Yeah, I caught a little bit of it. Right? Yeah. No, it was. I think it was a good game to see. It was up and down, mistakes made. Both defenses played good at different times. I think it was a good game. If you don't have a rooting interest in it, it's about all you could really ask for. So, I don't know. Last time I've checked, we haven't had a rooting interest in the Super Bowl in quite some time. So,
I think ever.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a really good game. I thought it was one of the better games in recent years. It was enjoyable to watch. I agree. I saw something on Facebook last night talking about who lost the game for the 49ers. And when I look at it, I thought both teams played really well. They both had their ups and downs throughout the game, as they're going to. I saw good play calling on both sides, and overall, I think it was just the Chiefs had their up at the right time, and they won the game.
Yeah, I mean they've done the same thing they've done
right
the last 2 weeks, right, in the playoffs. Just find ways to just drive the ball at the end. But at the end of the day, you're watching a Super Bowl where there's a couple minutes left in the game. There's a team down by 4 points, and they got an opportunity to drive the ball and win it, right? So, I mean, that's all you can really ask for. I feel like all too often it's a blowout one way or the other, and the game feels like it's over by halftime. So,
or there's like no scoring and it's just boring to
watch.
Yeah,
no, I thought it was a good game overall. I was good to see it. I'm glad to see the Chiefs win. I've always rooted for Andy Reid for whatever reason. I've always liked that coach, and it was cool to see him finally get one.
Yeah. I didn't really care too much, when people asked me, but I did want the Chiefs ultimately. It's what I kept saying, but I don't know why either. I like Mahomes as well. I like Andy Reid, so it was good to see. It was definitely a good game. And we have an exciting week coming up here in Detroit. Next weekend, we've got the Winterfest downtown. I know you said that you've gone to it before. I've not been down there for it, but it looks like a really cool event. So why don't you tell us about when you went?
Yeah, no, I think it's been a while, but ultimately is just they got it set up downtown. It's right in the heart at Campus Martius. There's all different kinds of the food and drink things going on. When I was there, they had like a huge toboggan run set up, so that was cool to see. And I think really this has not really felt like winter, so it's a good time to go down there and get it. And according to the groundhog, we're right on the tail end, right? So I think it's something you got to go down there and check out. You can take the family. It's if there's nothing going on, it's a good spot to go to this weekend for sure.
Yeah, I know there's free skating going on down there. If you need to rent, you still pay for that. I think it's $5 to rent skates. There's the slides that are down there that look pretty cool. Mount Brighton's going to be down there. They're going to be blowing snow, and I think teaching people how to snowboard and ski. So that would be kind of cool just to even say, I skied in downtown Detroit. It's kind of different, kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, for sure.
There's going to be a couple of stages with different concerts and performances going on, zip lining. Like you mentioned, the food. They got food trucks happening down there. So it really is going to be a pretty cool time to be downtown Detroit. And if you haven't been in a while, I definitely suggest it. It's Detroit's changed a lot over the last few years, and it's really a nice place to be now.
Yeah, and I plan on going down. It's been a while since I've been down there, so I'd be curious to see what new things they're doing now. But yeah, if you want to check it out, it's winterblast.com. But that's right downtown Detroit. So free event to get in, and there's a lot going on.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that wraps up this episode. It's a little shorter this week, but we'll get back on track next week, and we look forward to talking to you again next week.